Welcome everyone to another exciting interview in our Peer Review Week 2024 series with ACSE. And today we are thrilled to be joined by Jeffrey Robens, Head of Community Engagement at Nature Portfolio, and a publishing consultant passionate about supporting research development. Jeffrey, it's such a pleasure to have you with us today to discuss the including topics of machine learning in peer review and whether it's truly a game changer or potentially a double-edged sword. So how about you start with a little bit of your introduction?
Sure. Yes, I was a researcher for many years in biomedical research, about 20 years. Then I decided to leave research and I joined publishing. I've been with Nature now for about 9.5 years, where my main role is a trainer for the Nature Master classes. So I travel around the world delivering training workshops to try to support researchers, editors, and reviewers to try to improve the impact of the publications within science.
That's interesting. So moving forward to our main segment of interview today, how do you see that machine learning is reshaping the whole peer review process, particularly in terms of efficiency and consistency? Also, in your opinion, has it lived up to the expectation as a game changer?
Yeah, I think machine learning and artificial intelligence can be really useful for the entire publishing process, including peer review. One thing I think it's going to be really good for is helping with editorial triage. Reviewers don't want to be receiving papers that are not really worth of their deserving of their time. But a lot of editors, especially academic editors, are very busy professionals, and therefore they may be just sending through a lot of papers they receive, even though they're not really appropriate for their journal or more appropriate for the field. And so I think one way that machine learning can be useful in this is in evaluating whether or not that paper is actually appropriate for the journal, novel and original information that could be then sent on to review. So that's one thing I think it could be really valuable for. I think it'd also be really useful for editors to help them to identify the right reviewers. This is a common struggle that editors have. They're often relying on reviewer databases or simply just searching on, Scopus or PubMed or Web of Science to try to find those reviewers. But whether or not they have the appropriate expertise is unclear. So I think machine learning built into these systems can help to identify the right reviewers a lot faster and more quickly. That's also better for the reviewers because that means they don't have to spend all of this time declining reviewer invitations that are not appropriate for them. But I think it's also really important to help to improve the diversity of reviewers that are being used. We do see certain regions have, reviewing a lot more papers than other regions, and that's not really going to be fair in terms of the global population. And also by having that preference for certain reviewers in certain regions, just further helps to exacerbate all the idea of reviewer fatigue. The other things I really like about machine learning is there's a lot of mundane tasks in peer review. A lot of reviewers, they don't want to evaluate the references. Is the bibliometric information accurate? Are they authentic? That takes a lot of extra time. That's something easily that these machine learning systems would be able to do so the reviewers can focus on the science. I think it also could help to potentially avoid reviewer biases. A lot of authors are interested in double-blind peer review because they are concerned, is that reviewer going to be biased based on region, institution, names? But of course, machine learning and AI is not going to have those biases. That could be another really useful aspect. Now, in terms of has it lived up to its expectations? Not yet. I think, people are really jumping on to the whole AI bandwagon, in the last couple of years. And I think we're getting there. The problem is there's a lot of reservations from reviewers and researchers. Is this actually trustworthy and valid? The technology is still quite new, but I think it's also rapidly evolving as well. So publishers are trying to, stay up to date with the latest models to make sure it's going to be appropriate.
Exactly. So in terms of what are some of the potential risks of, or we can say the downsiding of integrating machine learning into peer review process, and how do you see, could it become a double-edged sword by introducing new forms of biases or errors?
Yeah, great question. I think one of the key issues, and you touched upon biases, is you have to remember, especially if we talk about generative AI, it's based on its training data. And there's going to be inherent systematic biases within that training data that's going to be reflected in the output. And that's going to be a main concern. But another thing that people haven't really touched upon, but for me is a huge issue, is that it's mostly trained, if it's trained on academic papers, on positive results, not negative results, not failed experiments, not the optimizations that researchers have to go through. So I think it really doesn't provide the full, repertoire of experience that a researcher really has. And I think that's really an issue that needs to be addressed and we have to be careful with. But also from the editorial perspective, they take this time to try to identify researchers because they feel that researchers really has, the finger on the pulse of the field. They know what's trending, what's important. So they want the reviewers, the person's interpretation and opinions, not that of a machine learning or an AI model. And so I think that diminishes the human value of peer review. Of course, another huge thing is going to be with hallucinations. These, especially generative AI, they do make up information. So that means all output has to be validated for accuracy, which could waste a lot of people's time. Data security and privacy is also a huge issue. Putting unpublished findings into these models could be used in training if there's no opt-out option, and that could be used for output for other people. And I've also heard a lot of reviewers taking the reviewer reports, putting them into these AI models to try to improve the quality or their clarity. And that could be a violation of confidentiality from the author, which is not appropriate. And a huge one that a lot of people don't talk about enough is about environmental concerns. A lot of these machine learning and generative AI models use vast amounts of energy to work, a lot of water to cool down the servers, that they're necessary, to store all of this data and these models. And as a lot of publishers, we have to keep that in mind. A lot of us, especially at Springer Nature, we strongly advocate for SDGs, and we're, striving for carbon neutrality. And if we become too over-reliant on machine learning or AI models, that actually helps to negate a lot of the strides we've made going forward.
With your experience as head of community engagement, how do you think that researchers and reviewers perceive the role of machine learning in peer review? And you have been a good experience conducting nature master classes. So is there a growing acceptance, or do you see that they are concerned about losing the human element when it comes to AI in peer review?
I think the human element's a great point that you brought up. This is something I very frequently hear from researchers at our workshops. They are worried it's going to take away that human element. They're excited about the potential, but they're worried that if we're over-reliant on machine learning AI models, that they're not going to have the same experience. Researchers, they're not just publishing papers, which is what these machine learning or AI models use. They're going to conferences. They're actively talking to their colleagues and collaborators. So they have a much better sense of the broader context of the field, and they can better appreciate the unique value a specific study would have within that broader context. And because a lot of that information is not inherent within those models, I think that's going to be lost. And that's another key concern a lot of researchers and reviewers have. So I think they are hopeful that it's going to be useful going forward, but they're a little bit wary about it at the present time.
Exactly, because keeping a balance, I think this is something very tricky with AI and every field, not just the peer review. So when it comes to machine learning tools, they have been taught it as a way to combat review fatigue, I would say, and speed up the review process. So do you think that this technology can help improve the quality of reviews, or does it risk oversimplifying complex evaluation?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I like the idea about in terms of the complex evaluations, because the complex evaluations, especially in peer review, is often focused on the data. Is it accurate? Is it reliable? Is it reproducible? Has it been published before? And unless you're someone like Elizabeth Bick, who has this great eye to identify image manipulation, most reviewers are unable to do that. But that's where I think machine learning AI models can be really useful. I know at Springer Nature, we developed something called Snapchat, which is an image manipulator tool. Science uses Profig. There's other different types of AI-based models to do that. And the benefit that has from the reviewer in terms of reviewer fatigue is they don't have to waste their time trying to evaluate, is this trustworthy, reliable, or previously published? they can really focus on the value and the significance of that information and the value that is going to be bringing to the field. And I think because they can focus on those more higher end elements, it will improve the quality of those review reports, the feedback that the authors receive to improve the robustness of the study designs going forward.
Exactly. So looking ahead, before we wrap up, what safeguards or regulations should be put in place to ensure that the machine learning systems and peer review process, it should enhance fairness, transparency, and accountability while minimizing the potential pitfalls?
Yeah, I think one of the key concerns that we're facing is that, especially from a publisher perspective, is that everyone's tackling this from their own perspective. And so the models that Elsevier are building are different from Wiley, different from Springer Nature, et cetera, and different from third-party companies as well. And so I think, firstly, we need to have some sort of industry-wide standardization that everyone knows if you're developing these machine learning tools or AI tools for peer review, these are the guidelines we need to follow. So from a researcher's perspective, they're going to have that consistency. It doesn't matter where I submit to. I know my paper is going to be evaluated in the same way. It's not receiving preferential treatment from one publisher over another because the models they're using are going to be different. Another key thing going forward is I think we need to have improved training on these models. Yeah, I think, up until now, a lot of people are based on what's already available, but now we're getting a proliferation of specialized models where people take the foundation models, training them on their own data sets, really making sure they're going to be optimized for the output that the people are looking for example, with peer review. But one of the benefit of local models then helps to improve data security and privacy because they're closed. They're not going to be opened up. You have to use the servers based in another country. They're based on local servers, and that helps to protect the confidentiality of that information, which is so crucial during the peer review process. And related to the peer review process, I think it's going to be essential that publishers are as transparent as possible with how those models are developed, or maybe even allowing independent validation by a third party to ensure that what they say is what they're using, but also how it's being used within the entire publishing process as well.
Exactly. I think with AI, transparency is something we cannot compromise at this stage. Otherwise, I think the whole publishing ecosystem, it will collapse in the next years, and how to fix it. So my last question would be that what are your thoughts in general for the theme of Peer Review Week, that is innovation and technology in peer review, and how do you see the Peer Review Week platform itself contributing to the field?
I think innovation and technology is a great topic to be focusing on for Peer Review Week, because I think with the peer review crisis, with the fatigue that researchers are facing with the review, we need new innovation. We need new models, new strategies to help to, it could be improving transparency of the reviews, and transparency of the reports. It can be how the peer review is being done, et cetera. But I think innovation is necessary. But innovation can sometimes take time to get from A to B. And that's where I think the technology aspect is really useful. It can help to speed up that development and also help to improve the consistency in these models. And again, I think consistency is really important from a researcher's perspective. And so I think it's great that this is really a platform for Peer Review Week, really highlights these key issues so people are aware of them, both researchers, editors, and reviewers. And by doing so, hopefully that will catalyze these new models and innovations that we're hoping for going forward.
Exactly. Thank you, Jeffrey, for sharing your valuable insights into the evolving role of machine learning and peer review. And I would say that this conversation has shed light on both the transformative potential and the complexities that come with integrating AI into the academic publishing ecosystem. So as we continue to explore innovation in peer review over the next week, I think your thoughts will no doubt spark further reflections, and we appreciate your time and expertise today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.